All right, folks, welcome to Just Another Black Conservative. Before we get started, I would like to say thank you to those that have subscribed to my channel. I greatly appreciate it. And to those that view my content, I'd like to say I am completely humbled that you would click to watch my video. And third, if you do like the video, please like it. It does help me continue to create this content. So in this video, we've got Piers Morgan and Nick Fuentes. Now, you know, this is going to be a fireworks of a video. But Piers Morgan makes a very important mistake. He thinks that he's going to bring on Nick Fuentes and he's going to embarrass him or shame him about the views that he holds. Now, if anybody knows anything about Nick, his views are his, and he has no problem expressing them, and he's completely unapologetic about how he feels. So let's get into this content and see exactly how this interview plays out.
Who is Nick Fuentes? Tell me about your upbringing. I know you grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Tell me about your early years.
Or early how? Like my childhood or a little bit later?
Yeah, your childhood, yeah.
Well, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in LaGrange Park, as you say. My parents are ethnics. My father's half Mexican, half Irish. My mother's Italian. And they both came from a pretty rough upbringing themselves. They both were raised by single mothers, not because of divorce, but because both of their fathers had died. They endured a lot.
Wait, I have to admit that I watched this video when it was live. So now we're going to go back through it with my commentary. And I just like to say that a lot of times Piers tries to catch Nick in things that he said or how he feels about things. But if we know about Nick, it's not going to even faze him.
The dysfunction. And I think that's one of the reasons they came together and they related to each other and they wanted to create a normal upbringing for their children. They wanted to have a normal family life. And so they moved out to LaGrange Park away from the city. And they raised me and my sister and really put us first. I think that's a big reason why I tend to have a lot of these family values or Christian values. My mother quit her job and stayed at home to raise us. And so I have a very close relationship with my parents, with my sister. We're a very tight family. And we grew up in a pretty idyllic town. And maybe we can sort of get into a conversation about politics from this. I loved my upbringing. My mom stayed at home. My dad was working. We're in a mostly white suburb in Chicago. I was maybe half Catholic, half Protestant. It was a baseball town. I played baseball for many years. In Chicago, we love our hot dogs. We have our baseball parade and get a hot dog. And so I love where I came from. I love this.
Let me say, me being a black person, black man, and a military brat, I was brought up a lot on bases. So where I was brought up, it was a very mixed group of people, meaning that the cultures that I was around was abundant, and it wasn't like a single thing. But I also played baseball, football, soccer, whatever the sport may be. And there is something to be said about that home feeling that Nick is subscribing here.
City. It's a working class city. I love the people here. They're very good, humble, down to earth, decent people. And I guess I had my political, not to jump ahead, but this is a big part of where my political awakening came from. I sort of left this bubble, if you could call it that. When I went to college in 2016, I went to Boston University and I read a lot of things online and I realized the country does not look like LaGrange Park. It doesn't look like Western Springs or Hinsdale or Elmhurst. It looks very different. The country's undergoing a radical transformation because of immigration. And so I saw that and I said, this is not really a desirable change. I don't like the south side of Chicago or the west side or LA or certain parts of Boston as much as I like where I came from. And I guess that's what made me an American nationalist. I said, I want to preserve my home and the things that are familiar to me and the things I like about my home, what makes it America. So that's a little bit about my background. I don't know where you want to go with that, but
well,
that's kind of where I came from.
My first obvious question is, were your parents immigrants to the United States, or were their parents, or Were they grandparents? In other words, at some stage, I presume, there were immigrants in your family who came to the US. Is that correct?
There were.
Now, this is a common tactic used by the left to say that you have these feelings about immigration and your family also immigrated to this country. So how could you have these negative feelings towards immigrants that are coming here? This is a fallacious argument because you can have a feeling about what's happening in the country because, of course, immigration has changed, especially over the last 35 years, where it's just been growing exponentially of the amount of people that they're allowing into the country, and they're not stopping at a certain point to allow those people to assimilate to the American culture. So it's like you're accelerating the amount of people that are moving here, and they're not assimilating. So it's basically changing the way the United States is looking.
I believe my mother was fourth generation and my father was third generation. So their ancestors came here on my mom's side in the 1860s, I believe, the first wave of Italian immigration. My father's ancestors, I think they came around at the turn of the century in 1900.
So your view of immigration, and we'll get to the specifics about your views on immigration, are they not affected at all by the fact that if it wasn't for immigration, you wouldn't exist as an American?
Well, I would certainly exist, but like you said, maybe not as an American. Certainly that's influenced in some measure. But I think that the kind of immigration that we had for a long time in the country, it's different than the immigration that we have now. And let's just say for openers, it's different immigrants. They're coming from a different place with a different culture, a different religion. It's not the same as it was. So first, you have a qualitative difference. My ancestors, for the most part, I have three European grandparents from Ireland and Italy, one from Mexico. They came from Europe. They came from a society where there's a common ancestry, there's a common religion.
Now, here's something that Nick misses, though, is that a lot of the countries, specifically the Hispanic or Latin countries, they're Catholic. A lot of them are Christian as well. So they do share the Christian values of the Europeans in most of the Latin American countries that are coming here.
Religion, common civilization. The people that have come in since 65, since Hart-Celler.
Wait, the only problem with the Latin countries that people are migrating or immigrating from is that when they come here, they're refusing to learn the language and assimilate to the American culture. A lot of them are. I find that the only reason why I say that is because why would you come to a country and live in it for 20 years and refuse to learn the language or naturalize yourselves as a citizen? I cannot figure that out. I mean, I've been trying to rack my brain around that, how you come here, you have kids, you raise your kids here, your kids are 20 years old, they speak English, you don't, and you never took the time to become a naturalized citizen. Drop in the comments on why you think that happens.
They're coming from China, India, the Northern Triangle, Mexico, Venezuela. And so first, they're just different people. Secondly, it's a quantitative difference. There's way more, and it's an unceasing, always increasing wave. For the first 3 or 4 waves of immigration, you would have a major influx of immigrants, and then it would stop. And then you'd have another wave, and then it would stop. This one, it just keeps going up for 35 years, and it's too many. So that's really where I would draw the distinction between maybe where I originate from. I would even just simply call that immigration. What this is an invasion. It's a completely different policy.
But you mentioned,
can't even call it the same thing.
But you mentioned Mexico in that list, and your father is half Mexican. So yeah, I mean, by your criteria, part of the invasion would include your father, presumably, and his immediate descendants who came from Mexico.
Not really true, because when my father's ancestors came here, it was a small fraction of the total immigrants that came from Mexico. I don't believe that we should have 0 immigrants forever, or even 0 immigrants from non-white countries. But you have to draw the distinction. My father's father, He was here in the 40s and 50s. It was his parents, or I believe either his parents or grandparents, that came here even earlier. Up until 1965, 90% of the immigrants were coming from Europe. I have no problem with that. If we have 10% of them coming from Mexico or Latin America, maybe that's reasonable, but that's not what it is now. Now you've got 10 million illegals in 4 years under Joe Biden, and you got millions more legal immigrants from China, India, Venezuela, El Salvador, and it's so many with no break for assimilation, and they're all from non-white countries. It's transforming what America is. And again, that's the distinction. That's what makes it unacceptable.
I always believe everybody is a product of their environment.
Now, you see how Nick makes an argument. He says that it's not that there's immigration happening, it's that there's immigrations happening and there's no break. So there's no break for America to assume the populations that are coming into it. So it's like an accelerated, basically it'll change the nation because you don't have time to assume that population. And as soon as he says that, Piers does not even address the argument. He's going to jump into a whole nother topic. He switches. So this is not really a debate. This is more of a Piers trying to shoot off a bunch of talking points to try to catch Nick and make it a wow moment, which it just won't happen with Nick because his following does not go along with this type of, I call it Jerry Springer journalism.
I've interviewed thousands of people. Maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people from all different walks of life. But the one common theme I would say is everyone's a product of their environment. And I was reading some stuff about you in the last few days. There was an episode of your podcast where you talked about your father, Bill Fuentes, and how he wouldn't take the family, including you, to certain restaurants because he believed they were associated with African Americans. We would be deciding where to go to eat, you said. What are we going to do for dinner tonight? It was a running joke. Me and my sister would say Applebee's, and my dad would say we would never eat at Applebee's. Not in a million years should you be caught dead, Fuentes said about Applebee's. Go to a different restaurant, a local restaurant. No Applebee's, no Red Lobster. That is commonly known as black fare. And you also shared another story about your family and restaurants. It said, before me and my sister were born, my family had a saying about Olive Garden that contains the N-word that we're not allowed to say. So my question, based on that anecdote that you say on your own podcast, is do you think you grew up in a racist environment, that your father was inherently...
Piers, have you ever been to a Red Lobster? It is a lot of black folks at Red Lobster. Just to say that. I don't know if Nick Fuentes' dad is racist or not, but he's factually right.
Racist, and that thought process moved to you.
Well, I would say it's a new low. I've been attacked for being a racist many times, but to attack my father, to attack my parents based on anecdotes, I would say that's sort of a new low.
Hang on, it's your anecdote.
Yeah, but he's not here to defend himself.
You are.
And my parents are.
You told the story.
And I will. And I'll defend them.
I'm not trying to ambush you. As I said at the start, Nick, to be clear.
No, it's not an ambush.
Nick, to be clear,
I think
I'm not
understands.
ambushing you. I'm literally reading an anecdote that you revealed on your podcast. It's you that's put it in.
Piers, now you know that's a got you moment. And you're trying to indict his dad because you want to indict his dad to say that it's because Nick grew up in that household, that made him racist. You know what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing. And Nick notices that's what you're doing too. And anybody who's watching this show can see it.
The public domain.
I know.
I'm simply asking you whether my assessment of that, which is that your father didn't want to take you to certain restaurants because of what you refer to as they were commonly known as black fare, whether that attitude to African Americans in that instance permeated to you. It's a reasonable question.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think everybody knows what that is, but I'll address it. I'll engage with it, and I'll defend my father from the charge of racism.
Sure.
No, my parents are not racist, and they've never been racist. I'll tell you about my parents. They used to...
Wait, isn't this a funny... Just because they were talking about this, but remember when Denny's was racist? Remember when a black person should not go to Denny's? I even think there's a funny clip of I think what's his name, Martin Lawrence. He said, "I don't want to go to Denny's anyway." All right, let's go.
Have a school in Chicago in the South Loop where they instructed people on how to shoot firearms. It was a security school, and most of the clients were black. And I believe actually one of their clients was Larry Hoover's son at one point, sort of a funny story. And so most of their clients would come in from the South side of Chicago. My grandmother, she grew up in the projects in the city. And so my family being in Chicago, being ethnics, being Italian, Irish, Mexican, in the West Side on Taylor Street, all over the city. My family for many generations have lived near and around black people. And look, my views about black people and their views about black people are shaped with experiences with black people. And what they will tell you, what my parents would say if they were here, is that for many, many years, the older generations of black people were very respectful, very humble, very decent. In fact, my grandma used to have an anecdote. She grew up in a lot of dysfunction. Her mother was mentally ill, and they would be having dinner in the projects, and there'd be so much chaos and dysfunction and disagreement and fighting. And she would look across the way out the window at a black family in the other apartment, and they'd be holding hands around the table saying grace. And this is sort of the culture that used to prevail. But now what you have in the city is that there's no accountability.
Now, I'm going to say this, and Nick doesn't say this, is that kind of what he's saying there is that in the black community, black homes, there used to be a sense of family. You'd have your mom, your dad, and the children. And they did have customs and where the family would sit down and eat together. But what no one ever talks about is what ruined that whole thing was, in my opinion, LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson. And what happened is when they decided to make welfare depended on whether if you had a man in the house, in order to get that money, the woman to get the money from the government, they had to kick the man out of the house. And once you do that, you're starting to tear away at the fabric of the family. And over the years, in my opinion, this has made it so that black men do not take responsibility for the children that they create, which in turn creates a single parent household. And you got a woman trying to raise black men who feel like they're in a bad spot and they can't get out of it. So a lot of them, truth be told, turn to crime, or they turn to the streets. And when they turn to the streets, the gang becomes the parents. The OG is your dad. The OG tells you what to do. The OG tells you where to go. It's a fact of the matter is it's a part of growing up to where you need to have a sense of belonging somewhere. You need to feel like you're a part of something. So that's how you get recruited into a gang. They jump you in, they hand you a heater, and now you're part of the tribe.
For the black people. And now Chicago has become a complete dump because these teenagers go out and they take over the city. They call them teen takeovers. That's the euphemism for it. They're teenagers, but they all come from the same neighborhood. They drive up there and they mug people and attack people and they destroy cars and destroy shops. We had the Festival of Lights a couple of weeks ago. It's supposed to be a family event. And they light up the trees and there's a big parade. I was in the parade one year and you had a bunch of black people there shooting each other. 7 people shot, a 14-year-old killed in the Magnificent Mile. And I know there's a lot of black people that feel the same way about this. They say, we've lost control of the city. and we're looking for accountability. We have a lot of black people that are always outraged about racism, outraged about attitudes from white people, but they're never ashamed of some of these behaviors, never ashamed of some of the things that go on. And that's why I think there's a lot of negative attitudes these days. And so, you know, again, I think those attitudes, you say I'm a product of.
Well, you can kind of see it, honestly, if you take a look at the music and the culture. And I'm speaking on this as a black man and talking about the black community in specific. And I admit, or I'm taking out the other races, because this is something that needs to be addressed about the black community, is that you can see it in the music, and you can see it on how people want to be as ratchet as they can be. Being ratchet makes you popular. Running around saying my booty hole pink, or whatever she said in her song, what's her name? Sexy Red. It just makes it sound like black folks don't want to get their act together. And when you have people running around, hitting people, looting stores. I mean, how many stores in Chicago or all over the country where they have to lock up things like makeup, or you have to lock up deodorant, and you have to call somebody from the register to take you back there to get your deodorant because people are trifling?
My environment, I am, and so are my parents and my grandparents. Unlike you, because you're not even American, in Chicago, we have to live in a big, diverse city where there's a lot of different kinds of people. And I think anybody in Chicago will tell you the same.
I live in London. It's one of the biggest and most diverse cities in the world.
But it's not the same.
Well, actually, it's a big, diverse city. The only difference is we don't have the gun violence because we don't have guns. That's a whole different story. I don't want to get into that with you. I have got into that before in America.
You got a knife problem. You got sword problems.
We have problems with
Aladdin.
We have problems with violent crime. I make no pretense of it. So the idea that somehow I'm cosseted in London because I'm not in Chicago.
I didn't say that.
Well, you kind of implied it. But I guess my point about the environment, I'm not saying you are a product of your environment. I'm saying most people are in some capacity. When I read that anecdote, it's just to remind you, it's not something I have put out there. You told this story.
Hold on. Another thing. You are, to some extent, a product of your environment. But it's up to you as a rational being to break out from your environment. You know right from wrong. You know that shooting someone, you know that stealing something, you know that's wrong. So in your mind, when you're making a rational decision about doing something, that's up to you. There's a sportscaster that I used to watch, I listened to on the radio, and he said something very poignant that's always stuck with me. And that is, when before you do something, say it out loud. And if it sounds stupid, it is stupid.
Right? And you said that
you said this. We're looping. You said this already.
But you haven't really directly, I think, responded to it, which is whether your father would not take you to certain restaurant chains because he associated them with black Americans. Is that true?
No. Well, see here, if you're in America, you would say that Olive Garden is not real Italian food. Applebee's, TGI Fridays, this stuff is a load of crap. My dad was just a food snob, but no, it's got nothing to do with that. My best friend in first grade was a black guy. We're not a racist family. So
okay. So when you told the story, I'm just curious. So when you told that anecdote, which clearly on the face of it is racist, right? You're basically saying your father made racist decisions about where you would go as a family to eat. Are you saying? No. Well, I'm just going to ask you a question. Are you saying?
Okay. I don't know why I got to stop it this time, but I won't stop it as much, but I'm going to stop it here because I don't know how many of you grown up in your household and you've been sitting there, the things that your mom and dad say in the house that you would never hear them say out in the street. I mean, half the stuff my mom and dad said when we were at home, people would think that they're nuts. But it was things you said in the home that you talked about amongst them. So if you make an anecdote about it on a show that you're doing and people are listening to it, and I mean, it may be done in jest or maybe funny, but it may be funny in in the confines of your house, and other people may find it offensive. Now, Nick's dad saying that he didn't want to eat at Applebee's or Red Lobster because a lot of black folks go there. I mean, on the outside world, yeah, that sounds racist. But is it really? We don't know. We don't know the dynamics of the household. Maybe it was a joke. So trying to pin racism on Nick Fuentes' dad and parents to try to explain why Nick is racist is kind of a reach to me.
That when you told that story, you didn't mean to infer that he was racist. And do you understand why when somebody like me reads that anecdote for the first time, as I did this week, I reach a different conclusion?
Well, I understand what you're doing, which is a sort of making of a murderer. How did he become racist? Well, his father didn't eat an Olive Garden because he said that's not real Italian food. Hang on, can I? What's with the interruptions? Can I explain?
I'm literally reminding you of something you said on your show, which led me to conclude a certain thing. If I'm wrong, tell me.
Yeah, it was said in jest as a humorous anecdote, and now you're trying to spin it into a narrative, which is his parents are racist. He comes from a long line of racists. And I think everybody knows my parents are boomers. Mm-hmm. And these people come, well, you're a boomer, I guess, too, in a way,
60.
right? You were born in
60.
19? Yeah. So you're a boomer also. Or maybe you're a Gen Xer. I suppose it's sort of on the cusp. But it's a humorous anecdote. These are kind of the attitudes of baby boomers in society. But you're trying to spin it into a narrative, which is you're a product of your environment. Your dad's racist because of this joke. Now you're a racist. And I don't think that's a fair characterization.
Okay. People can make their own minds up. They can go back and listen to you say it. I mean, the beauty of what I'm going to talk to you about in this interview is that almost all of it is just going to be reminding you what you have said and asking you what you meant. Your position about that story.
See, this is what Piers admits it. He's just going to bring up a bunch of stuff Nick said in the past or in present or whenever, and then try to make Nick feel ashamed about it, which we all know it's not going to happen because Nick is unapologetic on what he thinks.
Story is that it was a joke, okay? I want to come to something else you said. This is where you talk about Jews, women, and blacks. Let's just take a listen.
They're always coming up with, no, it's not the Jews. No, it's not women. No, it's not blacks. It's actually really complicated. No, it fucking isn't at all. Jews are running society. Women need to shut the fuck up. Blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. And we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
Okay. Would you like to clarify what you meant there?
That's all true. That's 100% true. Everything I said in that clip is true.
Including that blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part.
Yeah. Yes.
But all of them?
No, for the most part.
What does the most part mean? What percentage of American blacks would you like to see in prison?
Whatever the percentages of the murderers. I think it's 1 in 20 black men will commit a murder in their lifetime. So maybe let's say that, 5%.
Oh, so you're talking about black people who murder people?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But you didn't say that.
That's
you just said
problem.
Blacks need...
Okay. All right, we're going to go down this line of questioning about Nick saying that most black people should be locked up or in jail, in prison. And then, so Piers, of course, tries to call this out and is going to try to, again, shame Nick, which, of course, is not going to happen because Nick's going to stand by what he said. So he says 1 in 20 black men are probably going to make or commit a murder in their life. That's probably not true. I think it's probably because I think I don't know what the stat is, but it's going to come up here. I think it's 1 in 100, which is still a large number of murders. And again, it comes back to a lot of gang activity. There a lot of murders occur because of gang activity, which is a part of the drug scene and a part of prostitution and everything else that gangs do. But let's just go down this path.
Need to be imprisoned for the most part. You didn't clarify that you were talking about black murderers.
Right. No, you're right. That's a good addition to that. That's a great point.
Do you think it's funny or?
Look at Piers. You think it's funny? And look at Nick. Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah, I do. I think it's hilarious. I think it's totally true.
Do you think a black American would find it funny? You think that blacks should be imprisoned for the most part?
Blacks are my biggest fans. I get high fives all the time. They say, Nick Fuentes, I love your show. They agree with me. And you want to know why? Here's the difference. Black people are the most victimized by other black people. You think black people want to live in the hood and the ghetto and get shot all the time? That's what happens in the south side of Chicago. You should come here. I'll take you there. We could go to Garfield Park.
My son went to Chicago
Inglewood.
University for a year, actually, several years ago.
Yeah, that's a bubble. That's a bubble. You think you're in Chicago and Hyde Park? You don't know Chicago. Go a little bit west, see what it's like over there. And I'll tell you, black people agree with me because they're tired of it too. And maybe not most of them, but a lot of them agree with what I say about that because they know how it is. That's why the first thing they do when they make a little bit of money is they go and leave to another neighborhood.
Okay, so what was just remind me again, the percentage of black men who commit murder in America. What was the percentage you gave me?
It's 1 in 20. 1 in 20.
It's 1 in 100.
No, it's 1 in 20.
No. Less than 1 in 100 black US men commit murder. That's the most up-to-date crime statistics in America.
That's not true. I've seen other statistics. They say 1 in 20 will eventually commit a murder.
So your rate means that you're saying that 5 times as many black men commit murder as the official crime statistics say.
Yeah, there's a report, I believe, on X by Data Hazard. I'll have to go and double check that for you. But yes, there's some pretty shocking evidence that says that it's far more alarming than you would think.
Okay, but you would accept that the official crime statistics are 1 in 100? Or you wouldn't accept that statistic?
I don't know. I don't have it in front of me, but I've seen other evidence. Like I said, Data Hazard on X, I believe, produced a report about a year ago. It said 1 in 20. But, I mean, whether it's 1 in 20 or 1 in 100, that's a lot of people, Piers. I mean,
sure,
this is
a lot of white
problem.
people commit murder too. Well, they do, don't they?
Okay, but it's about proportionality. I mean...
So here it is when Piers tries to equate it and says, well, a lot of white people commit murder too. And then Nick says, well, it's about proportionality, of course. Per capita. No one wants to talk about per capita. But Nick tries to break it down here for Piers.
White people are 65% of the population. Blacks are 13%. Mm-hmm. And I think anybody would tell you that more black people proportionally commit violent crime than white people. And people vote with their feet. People would rather pay a much higher property tax.
Most mass shootings.
What's with the interruptions?
So here he is. He's throwing in the mass shootings. This is a very, very popular argument on the progressive side when you get into talking about crime in the U.S. or murder in the U.S. in particular, because you'll say, well, per capita, more black men commit murder in the United States than any other race. So then they'll say, well, more white men, young men, do mass shootings in America, which is true. But the question is, per capita, how many white mass shootings are there in the U.S. compared to the population of the white people? That's the question.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, you look at in Chicago, in New York, these neighborhoods are...
So this is what I mean. This is not a debate, because instead of Piers addressing the argument, he tries to shock jock it by putting up another statistic or another whataboutism, I guess is what I'm going to call it, where he tries to deflect and say, well, look at this. Put your hands up. Look at this over here. Yes, a lot of black men commit murder, according to the population of them in the United States. But a lot of white people commit mass shootings. But then you have to think about, well, how many mass shootings happen in the U.S.? And then you got to think about, there's 65% of the U.S. is white compared to the amount of mass shootings. How many is that actually in percentages?
So stratified. People would rather pay a high tax rate. They'd rather pay a much higher property value to live in a less diverse, less black neighborhood because they don't want to live around the violence. And I think that when you look at even on the public transit, the subway, the blue line, people don't want to go there because they know who...
Oh, let me tell this story. This is just an anecdote because Nick brings this up about how parents want their kids to go to better schools, and the better schools tend to be in the neighborhoods that are less, shall I say, less black, which sometimes is true. As a matter of fact, when I was living in the Germany, and we came back to the U.S., this would be sixth grade. It was a culture shock for me because I went to a public school in Alabama, and a lot of the teachers in this school thought that I was cheating because I did math in my head. And then in English class, I was reading on a 12th grade level in 6th grade, and they couldn't figure out how I could be reading on a 12th grade level in 6th grade. So immediately, I guess soon, my mom moved me to a private school, a Catholic private school, no doubt, where I actually did much better because I didn't feel like I was pigeonholed or being ostracized because I felt like I was, I don't know, maybe I wasn't smarter than most people in that class, in those classes in the public school. But it was much more of a challenge in the private school. Just an anecdote.
Occupies and menaces the public transit. It is these people like Daniel Penny had to deal with. It's people like Irina Zarutska had to deal with. And that's just the uncomfortable reality.
You've also said you don't want to live near black people. Let's take a listen to this clip.
I'm a new generation of white person. I'm not living around blacks. Sorry. You know, I want white kids, and I don't want my white kids bringing home black people to marry.
Now, this is a racist take by Nick. This is flat out racist, where he says that he doesn't want to live near blacks. He doesn't want his children or his girls to bring home black men to marry. This is clearly racist. But he's unapologetic about it, and he'll say it, and he'll lay it right out on the table that this is how he feels.
It's racial for me. And call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
I mean, it couldn't be clearer, really, unless you want to say that's another of your jokes. But you're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist. I think everybody, the only people that aren't racist or pretend not to be are white people to their detriment. Everybody else is racist.
But earlier in the interview, you got aggrieved at the idea that your father was a racist. You wanted to make emphatically sure.
Yeah, because
he's not.
Because my father doesn't share my same views on that.
So he's the exception to the everyone's a racist.
Well, everybody's a little bit racist. You're right. So maybe everybody. The difference is you're attacking my father. You know, he could get fired from his job.
I'm not attacking your father.
You are.
No, I'm not. I don't know your father. And to be clear, I have no knowledge about him at all.
Well, then let's leave him out of it. Let's leave him out of it if you don't know him.
Hang on, Nick. You put that story into the public domain on your show. I'm simply reminding you of what you told everybody, millions of people, about your father. If you now want to retract it, fine. If you want to say it was a joke, which is what your position was earlier, fine. But I'm allowed to put to you things you've said publicly. That's not unfair. That's not me targeting your father. You put that story about him out there.
You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing.
I'm asking you about a pretty shocking anecdote, which to me looked like you were saying your father made decisions.
So Nick admits he's a racist, and then Piers goes back to trying to adjudicate his dad. Leave his dad out of it. Nick is the one you're talking to. Here's the thing. I'm not a racist. I call myself an ageist. If I see a person between the ages of 13 and maybe, let's say, 40 out in the street with a hoodie on, smoking a cigarette, I don't care what race they are, my alarm bells go up. I don't care. I don't care what race they are. If they're wearing a hoodie, smoking a cigarette, hanging out on the street, just looking around, of course my alarm bells go up. I wouldn't say I'm a racist. I'd say I'm an ageist.
About where you as a family would eat based on skin color of people who worked at these places. If you say, or use them, if you say that is not what you meant, that's fine. You can respond any way you like. But the idea I can't ask you about it without you saying I'm attacking your father is ridiculous.
Well, you are, and you know what you're doing. And there's a political culture in America where if you have the wrong views, you get fired from your job. And my father has a job. And if you go on here and say you charge him with racism or something, and I'm put in a position where I don't look like I'm sticking to my guns if I don't say my father's a racist, you're putting him in jeopardy, and he's not here to...
Wait, am I a racist because I feel more comfortable sitting in an Asian restaurant eating duck and some white rice? Maybe.
Defend himself or explain his views, and it's very low, and I think you know exactly what you're doing, and people can see what you're doing. I'll defend my views, and I think that, you know, so let's leave him out of it. Let's just not talk about my father, because my father isn't here. I'm here.
Okay, well, then do you accept that you shouldn't talk?
Okay,
listen, that's fine. But then do you accept you shouldn't talk about your father on your show? And you shouldn't tell...
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So it's fine for you to put a story out there which would make most people who listened to that story or watched it at the time on your show conclude that he was racist. It's fine for you to do that. But if I then ask you about it, I'm the one who's being unfair and I've crossed a line. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're being malicious.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Listen, people are watching this live. They can draw their own conclusions about whether what I just did...
And they will.
Yeah, and I'm sure afterwards, by the way, you'll say, he ambushed me. With your own words. With your own words.
That's a little presumptuous. I'm not going to say it's an ambush, but I think that's a low blow. And I think you know what you're doing, and that's fine. You're a tabloid journalist. I expected that. I don't think it's an ambush because I knew it would be like this. And people will see what you're doing, and I think they'll say it's low. But as far as you want to talk about racism,
I do.
Let's talk about racism. Let's leave my dad out of it.
Look, you've admitted you're a racist, correct?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Own it.
Okay, that's fine. You're perfectly entitled in a free democratic society to stare down the barrel of his camera and tell me you're a racist. People can judge you accordingly. Many people who have assumed that you're a racist will now have heard it from your own lips. That's fine.
There you go.
That's the point. The point of this interview is to go over the things you've said, which have led people to reach conclusions about you, and to ascertain whether those conclusions are fair and reasonable or not. That's it. So I want to play you another clip. This is what you talk about why white people are justified in being racist. Let's take a listen to this.
First, white people are every single bit justified in being racist. Every single bit justified, to the extent that that means going out of your way to avoid black people when you see them.
You stand by that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So white people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them.
Absolutely. They would be wise.
Why?
Because it's a lose-lose proposition. If you're Irina Zarutska and you don't walk the other way, you get stabbed to death and you die. If you're somebody else and you walk on the subway and you stand near a black person or something, maybe it's fine. It's a lose-lose proposition. So no, I think that white people have been beaten into submission, that we're afraid to tell the truth about it. And the truth is that when you go into these major cities like New York or Chicago, I believe she was in North Carolina, there is a menace, which is young, black, adolescent men. They're extremely violent. And we have been told that we have to pretend like they are every other person. We have to be colorblind to that. And we're supposed to go and be in the midst of all this danger. And I think that at this point, it's gotten out of control. You look at the BLM movement, they said that the reason that black people, are violent, or the reason there's crime, is because of police brutality, or redlining, or all these other things. They said we need to get rid of the police. We need to defund them. And a lot of cities did. A lot of cities like Chicago, for example, the police changed the rules of engagement. They don't chase them. It's not a felony if you steal a certain amount of merchandise. They won't chase them on foot. And now the city's totally up for grabs. And now, whether you're in the Gold Coast or whether you're on the Mag Mile or you're in the worst neighborhoods in the city, you might get shot, you might get mugged, someone might run up on you. And I tell my followers, it is better to be perceived as racist or racist and walk the other way and maybe keep your life than to say, I'm a good anti-racist. I don't mind that this person's making me uncomfortable. Maybe he's looking a little froggy. I'm going to sit down because I'm a good person, and get stabbed, mugged, whatever. And by the way, this is a strategy. They call it the friendly stranger. There's a crew of them. They do this in Chicago. They stand outside bars, black people. They approach strangers. It's a robbery crew. And they pretend to be a friendly stranger, and then they mug them. And stupid white people say, oh, hi, yeah, nice to meet you. You know, they grin, they laugh, they put up with the nonsense, and then they get mugged, or worse. Sometimes they get executed. And so as a white person...
How do you feel about mass shootings at school?
See how Nick makes a point, an argument, and then instead of Piers addressing the argument, he switches the topic. Here's another antidote. By my house, there's a McDonald's, and next to the McDonald's is a junior high school. And when the junior high school is let out, a lot of those kids end up over at this McDonald's. What race do you think these kids are? Of course, well, not of course, but they're black. And are they extremely aggressive? Are they extremely violent? Standing in front of the McDonald's? Yes. McDonald's has to close their door and lock it. And then when you walk up to the door, they have to unlock it and slide it open so patrons can come in. Because if they just let those black children go into this McDonald's, they wreak havoc in there. There is no accountability by the parents. Everybody says that you cannot say anything because if you say something, you're racist. This is what happens. No accountability. You know, when I was a kid, my mom used to tell me several things. One thing was, never hang out in front of an establishment, never go to a store, never go anywhere. If you don't have money to be there, you don't need to be there. If you're just standing around and you're hanging out with your friends in front of a McDonald's, or you're walking into a Walmart, or you're going into a store and you don't have any money, you have no business being there. That's what my mom used to tell me. Don't be there. And you know what?
I think
I listened.
They're bad.
Who do you think commits the vast majority of the mass shootings?
I'm sure it's white people.
Right. So how do you feel about that?
I think that white people do more antisocial violence. I think black people participate in more gang violence. I think that's the difference.
What's the difference to the victims?
There's no difference to the victim, but it's a different kind of crime, and it's a different proportion also. Do you know what percentage of white people are school shooters?
I know that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools in America this century were perpetrated by young white men. And I'm
and
just,
what proportion
I'm curious.
What proportion?
I'm curious whether your advice would be to people who have kids in these schools.
Wait, is my mic working? What proportion?
Should they?
Pierce didn't want to. He didn't want to address the proportion question.
Should they avoid white people at school? Should people with the kids at school avoid young white men at school?
No.
Okay.
Do you know what per capita means? Do you know proportionality? There are more black people proportionally that engage in violent crime or are involved in gangs, especially in these major cities, than there are white people that are school shooters compared to the entire white population. And everybody understands that.
Two-thirds of mass shootings at school perpetrated by white people.
But what proportion of white men commit school shootings? That's the question.
I've just told you. It's 60 or 65% of school shootings by white people.
You're telling me what proportion of school shootings are committed by white people. I'm saying what proportion of white people have committed school shootings. Are you playing dumb, or are you just not that smart?
What difference does that make to the children lying dead on the...
This is what I mean by dumb. Look at Pierce's face. Just... Are you playing dumb, or are you really dumb? Because you're not addressing the argument that Nick's making. You're making up your own argument, or you're deflecting.
Ground.
See, now you want to jump on the victims. The difference is you're asking, would you fear white people or black people? And that's the difference. The difference is
I'm not. What I'm saying to you is, by your logic, if we now have agreed that the vast majority of mass shootings in schools are committed by white people and predominantly young white men, then presumably your advice would be to avoid young white men because they perpetrate these massacres. But it won't be because they're white, right?
So are you playing dumb or are you actually dumb?
Maybe
it's
I'm
about
dumb.
proportionality.
Maybe I'm dumb.
You are because you're, well, I don't think you are dumb. I think you're smart, actually.
Yeah, Piers is not dumb. He's doing this game intentionally. He's trying to, again, get Nick in a gotcha. Yeah, but we know it's not going to, it doesn't work with Nick.
But you're deliberately avoiding per capita. And everybody knows that's the difference. What proportion of white men are school shooters? It's probably 0.00001%. What proportion of black men have committed violent crimes? It's probably like 5%. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's very high. And I would add to that, even as it concerns schools, why do you think parents pay a super high property tax to live in a school district where there's white people? Because they know that if they go to the black school, it's going to be the Bloods and the Crips. It's going to be gangs. It's going to be, you know, you talk about school shootings. Nobody talks about all the school shootings that are committed by gangbangers in and around the school and all the other violence that's associated with that. I mean, these schools in the south side of Chicago, you know, it's just not livable.
I have an answer for you, Nick. So the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings is actually the same.
Did you hear what Piers said? He said, well, the proportion of mass shootings between black and white mass shooters is the same. That's still not addressing the argument that Nick made. What percentage of white people, according to the population, the overall population of white people, create or do mass shootings? That's the question. That's the argument Nick is making. Piers tries to address it in a roundabout way of not addressing it by saying he's not addressing the argument that Nick's making. I'll just summarize it there.
The black and white.
For white people, the proportion of
the proportion
again,
of the population.
Are you hearing it? No.
So I think the trouble with your statistics is a lot of them don't bear much scrutiny. We have a bunch of fact checkers checking all this in real time because you do have a tendency to just come out with a lot of old baloney.
See, like Piers just called it baloney, but his fact checkers are not fact checking what Nick is actually saying.
And when
wait, I wonder how much he pays his fact checker. I want to be one of Piers Morgan's fact checkers. I want to make that check.
When you say, you know,
okay,
well, it's true, and when you're confronted with reality, you don't like it.
What's the figure? What proportion of white people have committed school shootings? With white people as the denominator and white people that have committed school shootings as the numerator, what's that percentage?
For both black and whites, the proportion of the population who carry out mass shootings generally is about the same.
No. Tell me the number, and then
the only focus of your attention is the black shootings, the black crime. You don't want to live around black people. You want to avoid black people. You don't want interracial marriages or relationships that may produce black people. And yet, when I point out to you that there are many parts of crime in America where actually there's a majority of white people that perpetrate them, you don't care. You don't have any interest in that. It doesn't exercise your mind. Maybe because you don't. See,
no one's buying this. This
kids.
argument lost. No one is buying this. Everybody understands per capita, and people can even see what you race ahead and say, well, we're comparing the proportion of white and black school shooters. I said, no. Compare the proportion of school shooters that are white versus violent criminals that are black, because that was the basis of the monologue, is that you're very likely, if you encounter black people or a young black man in the city, that you're going to be the victim of a violent crime, of a robbery, a mugging, a car car theft, a carjacking, or a murder. That's the difference, and it's about proportionality. And everybody sees past that because we all live in reality. You want to talk about product of your environment. People that live in New York, Chicago, LA, we live in reality. We live in this environment, and we see what it's like. And the threat, the danger, in terms of probability, it's not even comparable. And I would say this to your point. If you're in a high school and truly, if you see a white person who looks like a little autistic, he's got the SSRI stare, and he reaches for a backpack, people joke and say, run. Similarly, if you see a jalopy pulling up with a bunch of black people in it and they got their pants around the ankles, you're going to run also. And I'm saying the same thing. The difference is the latter happens much more often. It's much more common. You know, in Chicago, there's like
black people pulling up in a jalopy with their pants around their ankles. You got to admit that was kind of funny.
10,000 carjackings and car thefts every day. It's in the thousands. It happens all the time. How many mass shootings committed by autistic SSRI white people? I don't even know. I mean, it's probably in the single digits in the last decade in this city. That's the difference, and everybody knows that. But you're really just trying to carry water for liberal ideology. It's an ideological position.
No, I'm really not. I can absolutely say, yes, there is way too much black on black crime, for example, involving guns in Chicago.
And black on white also.
Yes, but there is way too much gun violence in Chicago, right? I mean, it's indisputable. I've got no problem saying that. The difference is I don't then lead myself into a thought process where I have to avoid all black people in case they shoot me. And you've already conceded that you are a racist. So when people hear you then say, I don't want to be living anywhere near black people, they already have heard you say, I'm a racist, so they assume you're doing that because of people's skin color. I don't think you would probably dispute that, right?
Well, you're separating two different things. The monologue when I said I don't want to live around black people, that was after Irina Zarutska got shot. And it's true. I mean, they are a largely in this city, in Chicago, the South Side, the West Side, huge criminal population, and I don't want to live anywhere near it. And I want to live in a white neighborhood. I think that that's extremely desirable, and I think even
Nick,
black people do.
Nick, you're perfectly entitled to that view. But when you have obviously prefaced all this by saying, I am a racist, unashamedly, then people will assume that all your thought processes about all of these issues are driven by an aversion to people based on their skin color, which is the purest personification of racism.
Well, it's not an aversion. I would say it's the opposite. I like my own people. My own people are familiar to me, and I think that's true across the board. I think that people seek out other people that are like themselves, and every other group does this, whether it's blacks, Hispanics, Asians. You know, I get a lot of attacks when I talk about that I'm against interracial marriage. And what's funny is that every other group is against interracial or interethnic marriage. Jews, Chinese, black people.
Here's the funny thing. I know I mentioned this before, but being a child of a career soldier, a military, and living a lot of my life on military bases, mostly in Germany, I think I feel most comfortable around multiple cultures. And I think it's because my whole entire life, I lived around multiple cultures. And it wasn't like a big thing. I mean, no one really, of course, in the military, you had people who were racist or prejudiced. I mean, you're going to have that in any society you're living in. But it was much more homogeneous because a lot of the military families, it was like everybody supported each other because we were there on a mission. Your father or your mother, the soldier, was there on a mission, but also the family was there on a mission. That's why when you got the person in the military got orders to move to another place, everybody got a passport and everybody got dog tags and everybody understood what it means to have a dog tag. What it means to have a dog tag is that you're expendable. You are as expendable as the soldier that's in the military. which basically means if a catastrophe happens, they can identify you by your dog tag. You know this. Everybody knows this that's in the military, and everybody's family should know this. So it's a different type of vibe when you're living on a military base amongst other military members and family.
An interracial marriage.
Yeah, I mean, that's debatable.
Not
Let's
really.
say for the sake of
Not
argument,
really.
sure.
No, you're the product of an interracial marriage. And your father...
Here, I'll give you an example. My dad was a first sergeant for some troops. And basically, he's a babysitter, I think, of over 100 enlisted military personnel. And one of the people that he was in charge of was a racist. He was a skinhead. He wore the tattoo on his wrist, and he was very, very, but he was 19 years old. And my dad was his CO, or his NCO, or I'm sorry, he was in charge of him. So one night, this 19-year-old kid decided to go out and wreak havoc. Well, not wreak havoc, but he got into a little trouble on the economy or downtown in Germany. And my dad had to go get him and bring him back to the barracks. And my dad looked at him and said, I don't care if you're racist or you're not racist. In the military, you are my charge. So you need to get your act together or you need to get out. But until then, I'm going to treat you as one of my sons. And I'm going to monitor your activity and what you do and how you act until you're able to act like an honorable member of this military. And after that conversation with that young man changed his whole outlook. Just another anecdote.
Is part Mexican. You're literally,
for the sake of argument,
the very person you've just told me you want to avoid.
What race is Hispanic? Is that a race?
Well, what do you think it is?
I'm asking you, what race is Hispanic?
Hispanic, of course it's a race. It's called Hispanic.
It's a mix between two races. It's a mix between indigenous Americans and
It's not white,
Europeans.
though, is it? It's not white.
Well, you're apparently more of a racial purist than me. You got like a
one drop. You just keep saying you only want to live in a white neighborhood, but you're literally from a mixed race background yourself. You've literally got Mexican blood.
I know, and I live in a non-white neighborhood too. I'm trying to get out of here, though. But I'm trying to get out. But here's the thing.
Do you have any non-white? Do you have any non-white friends? Genuine question.
Most of my friends are non-white. Most of my friends are not, and non-white people love my show because they respect the honesty.
How many of your friends are black?
Many of them, like at least a dozen.
Wow.
Ye being one who you know, Sneeko being another.
Why does when someone asks you if you're racist or whatever, or when they try to verify whether you are not, they always ask you, do you have any friends of another racial group or ethnic group? Like that's somehow going to validify your non-racism. I don't know why they asked this question. I mean, you could still have prejudices and and have a friend of another ethnic background. I mean, and is it racism? Okay, here's my question. If you and your friends are standing around, you have a black friend, white friend, and an Asian friend, and you're all standing around, joking around, shooting the crap or whatever, and the Asian friend says to the white guy, you can't dance. Why you keep trying to dance? You have no rhythm. White people can't dance. And then the black guy says to the white guy, you can't jump. Why you keep trying to slam the ball? And then the white guy says to the black guy, you eat fried chicken. And then they're all just laughing, having a good time. And then they look at the Asian guy and says, why you keep eating that stinky kimchi? Is that all racist?
Another who you also know.
And so how do they feel when you say you just want to be away from any black people, walk away from them?
Well, you know what Ye told me? I'll tell you verbatim what he said. He said, so you use the N-word. I said, yeah. He goes, well, when niggas are being niggas. I said, so true. That's so true.
Did you see
so
it?
they feel like they're in...
does that...
Wait, did you see Nick just slid in the N-word with the A? He didn't drop the hard R. He dropped the A.
In agreement with me.
What does that mean?
It means that even black people know how black people can behave. Even black people understand it. And they know that it doesn't come from a place of, and you use the word aversion. That's the first thing I'll actually dispute.
Okay.
It's not an aversion on the basis of skin color, because that would seem to suggest it's like a stubborn, irrational bigotry. I don't consider myself a bigot. I consider myself a racial realist. I'm realistic about how the races are, and I speak provocatively about it. And I speak provocatively about our tribalistic instincts and tendencies as human beings. And I'm not a liberal ideologue that says that over time and with enough education, we're all going to see this great brotherhood where we're colorblind and everybody's the same. You know, I don't think that's ever going away. I think that race is real. It's not just skin deep. It matters to us and it matters to each other. And black people know that, and Hispanics know that, and Asians know that, and people like me that have partial Mexican ancestry, we know that too. And I think on that basis, we can have mutual respect and understanding, not aversion based on skin color.
The reason I use the word aversion is you literally said that you should walk the other way if you see black people. That is an aversion to black people based on their skin color.
No, that's called economy of information. That's economy of information. That's safety. And I said in the same monologue, if you watch it, it's like, I feel sorry. The problem is you clip the 10 seconds. I don't know if you watched the whole show, but in that monologue, I said, most black people are not violent or criminals. I said, and it's unfortunate that we're going to offend them when we turn and walk the other way. I said, but the problem is we don't know. We can't tell. And someone like Irina Zarutska, she sat down in front of a black man with her headphones in and wasn't paying attention because she was being a good liberal and said, I'm not uncomfortable by this. I'm progressive. Then she got stabbed in the neck. And I said, it's unfortunate that you would have to sit behind the black man to be safe. And if he's not violent or schizophrenic, he might be offended by that. I said, but I would rather offend him than die.
How many deranged white men have committed atrocious acts of murder in the last 10 years in America?
Proportionally, far fewer.
But how many?
Fewer.
How many? Do you know how many?
You have a research team. You pull it up. I don't have it in front of me.
You're obviously extremely exercised by that one story, which was horrific, for the record, absolutely horrific, and should never have happened. The person who perpetrated that evil act had a string of previous offences and should have been picked up more, and it should have been amplified more. I completely concur with all of that. But I just suspect you have no idea how many white people have committed similar crimes, do you?
No, because I know it's far fewer from experience. Okay. Because it's like you said. Well, and hang on, and I would add to that, you know, Irina Zarutska wasn't the first one. That was also after Austin Metcalf was killed in Texas.
Sure.
After Carmelo
how many
Anthony
times has it been perpetrated
neck.
by white people?
Well, hang on. Let me finish my point.
But you're implying that white people don't do this. And my point to you, Nick Fuentes, is of course.
Oh, I never said white people don't do it.
Of course, deranged white people commit heinous acts. But you don't either know.
No disagreement.
You neither know nor care, or maybe both. Maybe you do know but don't care. You only seem to be focused on black people who commit crimes. And again, if you hadn't prefaced the whole debate about racism by openly conceding you are a racist, I could read other connotations into what you've been saying. But once you've said, I'm a racist, and then you only talk about black crime, I think people can watch this and they can say, yeah, he's a racist. And everything that he says about crime is driven through the prism of being a racist who judges people according to their skin color.
Well, it's funny because it's quite on the contrary. And I said this in a similar monologue. You know, the problem is not that I wake up and I walk down the street and I see someone that doesn't look like me and it makes me angry. The problem is there's a pattern of behavior, which we've all seen. blacks in America have become narcissistic, and they become narcissistic because they've been told they're victims of racism, they're victims of slavery. They've been told really there's no accountability. If they're rude, if they're inconsiderate, if they're criminal, they are told that they have no agency for their actions. They're being told, if you act in this way, it's because the white man made you that way. It's because the system's rigged against you. And so we have been telling black people this for a generation, and now there's no rules. Now they go, and what we hate to see as decent people, not even as white people, but decent people, even black people too, what we hate to see is rudeness, obnoxiousness, inconsideration, criminality, violence. And that's that pattern of behavior that we see all over social media, on
so
the
just
body
to be clear,
cam footage,
you don't like black people who play the victim and are rude. Is that your position?
I don't like that pattern of behavior.
And who are narcissists?
I see where this is going.
Yeah,
you're ahead of me. Turn this around on me.
You're ahead of me, aren't you? Because when I said, what black friends have you got? You said,
I am kind of black, aren't I?
No, not that. You said, I'm not saying you. I'm just saying your choice of black friend is Ye, who is arguably the #1 black victimhood narcissist in America.
Again, Piers Morgan flips this back on Nick rather than addressing the argument. Very easy to do this with people when it's your show and you can do this kind of thing without addressing anything that Nick is saying. Of course, like I said before, this is not a debate. This is basically I'm going to get you, Nick, or I'm going to try to make this shocking show make people not like you or shy away from you or somehow embarrass you. But Nick's been doing this, I don't know how many years, and he's had these interviews before, maybe not this large of a platform, but it doesn't faze him. So this is not the way to go after Nick. In order to go after Nick, you're going to have to start attacking his arguments and dismantling them. This in no way dismantles his argument. Now, the progressive left and the left will probably think that Pierce did something here, but he's done nothing.
Okay. Do you understand the problem? So he's your friend. He's one of the very few black people you want to be associated with, but he's the epitome of what you just said you abhor about narcissistic black people.
I disagree. I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. Because Ye, if you've ever met him in real life...
I have, yeah.
Okay, well, then you know. He's nothing but polite, considerate.
Actually, he was very rude to me the last 2 times I interviewed him. He's a supreme narcissist, and he's also...
Well, you keep interrupting me. You're very rude. Are you black? Because you're being very rude by interrupting me right now.
To you.
I'm giving you a hard time, but I do want to finish my point. I do want to finish my point about Ye. He is a guy who, when I was with him, wanted to make sure that everybody was heard. Everybody felt included. He's actually a very soft-spoken guy, very polite, and by the way, not violent. When you look at all the rappers that are in the music game, many of them, especially from Chicago, drill rap, they're talking about killing people, shooting people, they gangbang. He notably, if you know about him, he got his start because he was a nerd. He wore a backpack and a polo, and he wasn't a gangbanger. He rapped about his feelings and girls and his dreams and his ambitions. So, no, and by the way, he would tell me all the time, he doesn't even feel black. They make him feel not black because he doesn't do those things, because he's soft-spoken, because he's artistic, because he's a bit of a nerd or likes fashion. So I would disagree.
This actually does happen in the black community. Just another anecdote. I know anecdote is not the standard of the whole, but my entire life has been that way. Because I would speak English correctly, thanks to my mom. Mom was very, very hard on me on speaking English and writing English using the correct. I'll tell you a story. One time, I was talking to my mom, and I'm just having a conversation with her or whatever, and I said, "I ain't got none." My mom's hand flew up so fast and hit me in the mouth, I didn't even know her hand was up. And she says, "What did you say?" And I said, "I don't have any." She said, "That's not what you said." you don't use double negatives. My mom hit me in the mouth for using a double negative. Do you think I ever did that again when speaking with my mom? No. But my relatives who live in Alabama, every time we would come home from being overseas, and I would go to the hood projects, because that's where my cousins and aunts lived, we would always be called, I mean, you know, it was never really like out. I mean, it was kind of outright, but kind of not, where they would always say that you guys speak good English, or you guys speak white English, or you're proper. I think that was the term they like to say, proper. You're proper. Kind of trying to say that we speak white, which I never could figure out to this day what speaking white is, besides the fact that you are able to create a sentence with a subject and a subject and a predicate, and you're able to use the right conjugation. I mean, whatever I'm trying to say. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. It's kind of late right now while I'm doing this. Anyways, stringing words together. But that was another thing my mom always used to do. She used to make us write all the time. Like, I remember I'd be watching a TV show, and my mom would come in and she'd say, "What are you watching?" And I'd be like, I don't know. She'd say, "Write me a paper. Write me a paper about what you're watching on TV." So I'd have to write a paper, handed it to her, and she would actually grade it for grammar. Imagine that.
He's actually not like that at all.
Okay.
We're talking
he's also a Hitler-loving anti-Semite. We're going to...
Just to give another side of that, my mom and my dad were like opposites, in the sense that my dad was street and my mom was into education. So sometimes my dad would come in and try to use slang in the house, and my mom would say, "Don't come in here speaking like that. Did you?" And then she'd say, "Did you go past English class? Because I don't think you sat 1 minute in there."
Take a little commercial. I think he's very fucking a monster.
Okay. That's a clip. I think he's very fucking a monster. Do you hear yourself?
Yeah, I mean,
can we all grow up?
I do.
Can we all grow up?
He murdered 12 million
childish.
people. He murdered 12 million
Okay.
people. What is very fucking cool about that? Tell me.
The edits, it's just cool. The uniforms, the parades, it's cool as a guy. You look at World War II, and it's fascinating, and it's interesting, and it's compelling, and it's cool. And you know, we're just tired of saying these kinds of things. We want to talk like real people and give our honest opinions, and then we literally get an old Jewish guy from England who's going to say, "Oh, that's not very funny, mate. Me mom," and it's like, shut up, like. You know, no one is in favor of genocide. So let's just get that out of the way. We're not in favor of a Holocaust or genocide.
Do you think if half your family
had been,
you think if half your family had been wiped out by very fucking cool Hitler, you'd still think he was very fucking cool? Or would you think that actually he was a despicable monster who murdered 12 million people, who targeted people because they were disabled or Jewish or Romani Gypsy or whatever it may be? And that he systematically destroyed people, incinerated them in gas chambers. Do you think that you would find it very fucking cool if your family had been through that? Or do you think you would find it very...
Right now, Piers Morgan is lecturing Nick, and look how just Nick's body language is like, "Oh, you're just lecturing me. I'm not interested in your lecture." I still think Hitler was cool. And I mean, if you go back and you look at the history of it and how it all went down and how he had them in their uniforms, and he kind of changed the whole German society and did his whole takeover of the government and became, I don't even know what it was called then, president or chancellor or whatever they call it in Germany. It is kind of a fascinating time, and you're always supposed to study your history, and you're supposed to understand what was happening so you don't repeat these kind of things. But silencing people and not letting them talk about it is not going to change anything, Because again, we know that the more you say something is taboo or shouldn't be done, is the more somebody wants to do it.
Very fucking disgusting. And perhaps moderate the number of times you laugh about it, or want to joke about it, or want to abuse someone like Danny Finkelstein, who's written incredibly powerful books about what happened to his extended family at the hands of the Nazis and your other hero, Stalin. See, my point to you, Nick Fuentes, is that in parts of this interview, you try to come across as moderate, but every now and again, the mask slips. And it slipped again here with what you say about Hitler. There's nothing very fucking cool about Hitler. We know that from history now. We know what he did. You've already conceded that he murdered at least 6 million Jews. So when you say he's very fucking cool, Jewish people watch this and go, this guy's disgusting. Why would he say this about someone who perpetrated such an evil? And what's the real answer? Why do you? Is it just for clicks? Is it for money? Is it just for fun? For shits and giggles? What is it? What motivates you to say something like Hitler was very fucking cool?
It's for this. It's for all of this. And the lack of self-awareness is amazing. You're a boomer. You're a 60-year-old boomer. And we've spent maybe 3 minutes on you saying, he's a really fucking monster. He incinerated people. And I'm sitting here saying it's not that serious. It's not that deep. And
not that
what
serious.
I'm getting at.
Not that serious.
Do you want to say more about he's a monster?
You're not a kid yourself anymore. You're not a teenager.
I know.
Right? You're nearly 30, to be clear.
Yeah,
okay? You're a fully formed adult who has a brain, right? And at some stage, that brain is taking you off these rabbit
warrens. Is this an
warrens.
interview or is this a lecture? Can I respond to what you're saying?
I want you to explain why you think it's fine to say how fucking cool Hitler is and to dismiss the very powerful 90 seconds from a British journalist who lost a lot of family members to the Nazis in such a callous, dismissive manner.
I don't think it's powerful. I think we've been hearing that our entire lives, okay? The Schindler's List. Let's just be honest. The propaganda is over the top. We have been in America.
What about the Schindler's List? Tell me about the Schindler's List. Well, tell me about the Schindler's List.
I'll tell you about it. We have been browbeaten as a people, as Americans, as Westerners, for our entire lives. And do you know what this has done? It has taken away any sense of pride, any sense of love for our own civilization. We have been made the villain in our own story. We have been made because, well, let's just be clear. It doesn't begin and end with Hitler is a monster. This has been the political narrative, which is why we have thrown open the borders. This is a political narrative, which is why we can't be a conservative society as a whole anymore, why we can't be proud of Europeans, why we can't be proud of being Christian, because they've told us if you're too white and too proud and too Christian, it's going to lead to a Holocaust. And so my generation, our entire lives,
honestly, Nick Fuentes,
and that's why people like me. That's why I'm popular, because this is bullshit.
Shit. Honestly,
yeah, it's a crock. We don't want to hear any more about me mom and me dad. That's a crock of shit.
No, listen. What you just said is a crock of shit. And you
it's
know
true.
it.
It's called the open society.
In your gut, you know it is. You weaponize this stuff.
You know.
You weaponize this stuff for money, but you know when you say something like what you just said.
I'm banned from banking. I'm banned from banking and credit cards. You know who you're talking to?
Yeah,
I do it for money.
And by the way,
how much money you make? Your company's worth $100 million. Your company's worth $100 million. I was banned from Bank of America.
And you shouldn't
I'm
have
banned
been.
from processing credit cards.
And you shouldn't have been.
But I am. So don't tell me I'm doing it for money.
Well, ask me my opinion about that. I'll tell you you shouldn't have been. Right? I don't agree with that. What happened to you?
Then don't say I'm doing it for money, because you know that full well, and you say it's a grift.
How much money
if I wanted to be a grifter, I'd be like you, and I would go and say,
how much money are you making?
I'm making a lot of money now.
Yeah.
Now that I'm the #1 live streamer in America, because people agree with me more than they agree with you. We're tired of hearing about slavery and the Holocaust and Jim Crow. We're done hearing about that. You guys overplayed your hand.
I'm not done hearing about that.
Okay, well, you know, your generation's on the way out, and Generation Z is coming up, and we're finished with that. We're ready to take our country back.
I've got three sons.
We're not listening to crying minorities anymore.
I've got 3 sons, and they don't share your views about slavery and about the Holocaust. They can have decency and compassion and humanity about some of the worst things that have happened in the last 150 years or more. They can do that, and they can also have concerned views about issues like immigration and other issues. The two things are not mutually incompatible. You can have different views about different things. It's your lack of humanity and compassion for people about things like the Holocaust, about slavery. It's that people find so contemptible. And I don't understand why you need to do that. Is it, again, I just ask you, is your motivation financial? Is your motivation for fun? What is the motivation to saying these outlandish things, which you don't need to say, and which I suspect, I don't know, I suspect a lot of it is performative. So what is the motivation?
I'm an iconoclast. The Holocaust is not my religion, and it is treated like a religion. It is treated like a religion with dogma, with blasphemy laws, and that secular religion says, and you say that's a crock of shit. It's intentional. It's called The Open Society by Karl Popper. It's by these architects of the liberal order after World War II. They got together and they said, how can we make sure that Hitler never happens? How can we make sure that totalitarianism never happens again? And they came up with the consensus, which is that we need to take down nations, religions, fathers, the authoritarian personality. We need to be empathetic and altruistic. We need to be diverse and pluralistic. And that experiment isn't working. And I'll tell you the truth. Right now, and you can laugh at this, you can scoff at this, our people are being genocided in our country. 50% of the live births in the United Kingdom and in the United States are non-white. In 100 years, my ancestors, your kids who are so empathetic and compassionate, they're going to be a minority. They're going to be a minority in maybe a Muslim country, an Indian country, an Hispanic country. And these Jewish people that are 100 years old talking about my grandparents and the Holocaust, they don't care about that. Actually, they like to see it. At the SPLC, they're literally counting down the days until whites are a minority in America. So forgive me if I don't believe them when they talk about compassion. There's a genocide going on right now. It's not against the Jews.
How many Christians are?
So here's the funny part about this is, and I've been pondering this in my head for a long time too, and Nick he touches on it, but here's what I'm thinking. Now, the black community and the white community, particularly in the United States. The black community in the United States is the largest group of people who unalive their babies in the womb. Second is the white community. The people who do not unalive their babies in the womb are Latin and Asian. So just think about that for a minute. So like if black people are unaliving their children and white people are unaliving their children and Latin people and Asian people are not, common sense tells you what about the population? This is why they always say that the population is going to become brown very shortly. And that's why. Because if your group of people are not having children and promoting healthy children and a healthy society for a healthy society where these children are going to grow and learn and be productive members of the society, you're going to lose out. And you can see this too by looking at test scores in school. Now, test scores in school. Who scores highest on most tests? Asians. Now, it's still right now where the white population does do better than the black and Hispanic population or Latin population in school. It's still, but by far, the most successful in school are Asians. Again, Asians do not unalive their children. They do not unalive the unborn. Black folks unalive the unborn the most in our country. How can you be a successful group in America or any other place if you are not having your children and you're not raising them to be productive members of society? Think about that.
Gaza, it's against
How many
whites.
Christians are there in the world? Like me and
1
you.
point some billion,
Yeah,
2 billion.
How many Jews are there?
15 million.
Okay. So with a straight face, you're going to tell me the world is being overrun by the Jewry, by 15 million people, when there are over 1 billion Christians. There is a genocide of Christians like poor old Nick Fuentes going on at the hands of these 15 million Jews. Really?
See, this attitude is why you're losing. When you say
Who
poor
am I losing
old
to?
white people,
Who
these
am I
poor
losing
old
to?
white people.
Who am I losing to?
You're seeing it, mass migration. Oh, you're losing to me. We are losing as a civilization of mass migration. And here's the difference. In Israel, they have my politics. In Israel, they want to maintain a Jewish majority. If they had it their way, it would only be Jewish people. They're fighting like hell so that Jewish people can have as much territory, a Jewish state. They can be proudly Jewish in their own land. Whereas in America, we are being besieged by 10 million illegal immigrants in 4 years. And then whites and Christians are going to be the minority. And that's true in Canada, Australia, all the countries in Europe. So you could say there's 2 billion people, but what's the proportionality? What is the percentage of people being born that are white? Where's the arrow pointing? Where are we going to be in 50 years? In 50 years, there might be in Israel. In 50 years, there isn't going to be a white Christendom.
Who is Nick Fuentes?
All right. So that's just the portion of it that I watched and I decided to comment about. That last part about what Nick says is something that of course, I've been thinking about when I say the amount of babies that the black people unalive and the amount of babies that white population unalive compared to the other populations, Asians and Latin people, is huge. This is why it's going to change the outlook of the United States and actually most European countries, because these other groups of people do not unalive their offspring. Muslims don't, Asians don't, Latin people don't. They would much rather have the child. No matter the circumstances, they will have the baby, they will raise the baby, and of course this will that would outproduce the white and black community, which will eventually move them out. I mean, this is common sense. Anyways, I'd like to say thank you for watching my video. I appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed the content, like it, and I will see you on the next video.